You know when you've played Monopoly and you land on a little square and it says, give us some ground rent? That you never really knew what it all meant when you were a kid, but we've all played Monopoly at some stage. We've all drawn one of those cards saying ground rent due, pay such and such an amount of money. But what does that actually mean? Well, in recent years, nothing has become more important about your home than whether it's freehold or leasehold. It makes the difference between owning the property outright and having a landlord. And unfortunately for some, particularly first-time buyers, when you're wrapped up in all that excitement, it can be a substantial amount of cost on top of your mortgage. So we're not talking, 20, 30 quid a year here. Sometimes we're talking a lot more. Now, this is 27-year-old Ashleigh Wilson from Prescott here in Merseyside, whose dream home, when she bought that, well, it turned into a bit of a nightmare.
So it should have been a bit of a dream home, and actually it's turned into a bit of a nightmare, to be perfectly honest. So I came to view, it was a show home. I came to view the show home with my mum, and obviously young girls seeing a lovely decorated house fell in love with it. Spoken to the managing agents for the housing company at the time and said, don't really know what to do, really want to buy the house. And she said, don't worry, we'll sort it all out for you. We'll cover all the solicitor fees and we'll give you a date to move in. So I thought, great, we'll come and move into the property. And at the time, my mum noticed in the paperwork that it mentioned something about a lease and a charge associated with that. So she questioned it with the housing company at the time, who said it's just because we're still building on the site that we're not able to sell the land. But once that building work is completed and you've been in the property for 3 years, you'll be able to purchase the lease at 10 times the ground rent. 12 months after moving into the property, I received a letter to say that my lease had been sold on to an investor, to a different investor company. At the time, I thought, oh, that's strange, because I thought they weren't able to sell the land while they were still working on it, but also knew that I had the 3-year wait, so I had another 2 years left, so quite naively didn't do anything about it at the time. And then when the next 2 years elapsed and I was in a position at that 3-year point to be able to buy the lease, I contacted that leasehold company, who told me that they did not wish to sell me my leasehold because they had invested in my property for the long term. I think I was quite naive. I think I put a lot of trust into the management agent because I assumed that they were specialists and they would know a lot more about this than me. If I could go back, I definitely would not buy this house. I feel like I'm trapped basically in a home now that I really shouldn't be at this age. I'm only 27 now and I feel like my life's basically on hold until this mess is resolved.
Well, there's Ashleigh there, Ashleigh Wilson from Prescott, who from you've just heard what she said, just feels as though she's been totally conned with this. Well, the Law Commission has recently completed a consultation, just asking people in England and Wales if they prefer the common hold system to leasehold the way they do it in Scotland. They do it in a different way in Scotland. This is David O'Leary from the Home Builders Federation, I beg your pardon. He defends the leasehold system.
We wouldn't like to see a complete scrapping of the leasehold system, but obviously there have been some instances where consumers have been taken advantage of in some cases.
I've just been to see someone called Ashleigh in Liverpool, and she can't sell her house because there are just so many fees on top of anyone buying it, on top of her mortgage. Is that fair?
By and large, leases are fair and reasonable and have ground rents that really don't impinge on the property's value.
Yeah, the key word there is by and large, so not all the time. So what's the difference between freehold and leasehold, and why has it become such a problem? Let's talk to Paula Higgins, founder and chief executive of Homeowners Alliance, which has long campaigned for the abolition of the leasehold system. Paula, good morning to you. It's a real sticky situation that certainly Ashleigh found herself in, but in the excitement, in the build-up, you're a first-time buyer, you want to go for this, you pretty much sign anything at the time.
That's true, but I mean, it's deeply unfair for Ashleigh. And I think she's being hard on herself when she's saying she's naive. Buying a house is the biggest purchase you have. You haven't done it before, and you need to be protected. You need proper legal advice. She shouldn't have been sort of conned into using their conveyancers, and she's been missold. And something needs to be done about it. So, because as she said herself, her life is put on hold, which is why it's made the whole word leasehold toxic, and that's why we're calling for the ultimate abolition of it.
So in a simple way for me to understand, freehold and leasehold, what's the difference?
Well, the difference is leasehold is that you're actually buying the right to live in the property for a certain length of time, be it 99 years or 999 years. The difficulty within Ashleigh's situation, she bought a house, she bought her own front door, thinking it was freehold. She's got the land underneath it, and it wasn't. It's a leasehold house, and she's got less rights and protections than if, for instance, if she's to buy what we think of typically a leasehold property in a block of flats. And that does make sense, because you do need to have some sort of mechanism to be able to share costs for the maintenance, to share costs for the roof repairs and whatnot. So in that respect it does, and where common hold maybe could make a difference. But there's no reason why anyone who's buying their own standalone house, it should be leasehold.
And common hold, is that something different between, is that another thing that you throw into the mix, a common hold? How does that work?
Well, common hold has been around on the books for a while, but there's a handful of properties that's been built. And one of the reasons, I think, is because there's actually money to be made out of leasehold. But the idea is that everyone is generally more, again, for blocks of flats, right, where you've got a share, and you're all there in it together. You're all paying for the repairs. And this happens almost everywhere else in the world. Why can't it happen here? We're stuck with this feudal system.
So if I'm a landlord, if I own the land and I say to a building company, yeah, go on, you can build 20 nice new homes on my land, but I'm going to keep the land, and each homeowner, I'm going to charge them, say, £25 a year, which is neither here nor there. But somebody comes to me and says, I'm going to buy the lease, and then when I buy it, I'm going to charge everybody £500, and it will go up, it will double. That bill will double every 10 years. We've seen cases like this. I mean, in the end, the whole house of cards is going to fall down. You're not going to be able to sell your house.
And that is happening right now. And it's not even just the ground rent. It's also the permissions. So, you've got people who bought, the freehold, in a long-term asset, and you have to pay as a leaseholder to remortgage. You have to pay if you want new carpets. You have to pay if you want to sell, and, big amounts of money for sellers packs and things like that. So it's just seen as a way to make money out of leaseholders, and that is what's unfair.
So what are the government going to do about this? Because they're looking at this, and I know you've been a long-time campaigner.
Yes, I mean, the government has recognised it, and to be honest, I think there are fewer leasehold houses being built now because they're not being sold. Banks are not lending on them. But the difficulty is there's nothing happening for the people who are in this situation like Ashleigh's. There are, some of the developers have got assistance schemes set up to convert the doubling of ground rents into an RPI, but there's not really much going on. For the future, government does have consultation out, and they are looking at scrapping ground rent. Right. They are looking at banning leasehold houses, but that's not going to help the people who are stuck today.
And just one final point, if you're hell-bent on buying a house, maybe it's an older house, and there have been some cases where, yes, the house is leasehold, but they can't find someone who owns the land. It might be a very old house and they can't find the landowner. You can take an insurance policy out for a small fee, an indemnity out, in case son of or grandson or great-grandson of the landowner comes back and says, that's my land, that'll have some ground rent. It's called an indemnity, and these exist as well, don't they?
That's true, and it is true that it does happen, especially if it's an older property and the builder or the developer's eventually gone bust. And that's not where these sort of toxic properties are happening, because traditionally there were sort of freehold properties, and that's quite a simple thing to do. You just need to make sure you pick your conveyancer or solicitor very carefully to do all the groundwork and look really carefully into the title.
All right, and just very, very briefly, if somebody is thinking of buying a new home and it's a leasehold, what advice would you give to them?
Well, we've got lots of advice on our website. Again, choose your conveyancer very carefully. Look through the terms. Read that lease. Don't go near leasehold houses at all. And if you are in a leasehold house, try to look to buy the freehold.
Good to talk to you, Paula. Thank you very much indeed. There's Paula Higgins. That website, of course, is the Homeowners Alliance. They're on social media too if you want to maybe follow them and ask them some questions too. And Paula, who's the chief executive, as we mentioned before, long campaign for the abolition of the leasehold system, particularly on house. A bit different if you're buying a flat. It's a different kettle of fish there, as Paula mentioned. But yeah, it's a really interesting. And Ashleigh, I hope you get sorted out as well.